We'll continue on our stewarding lesson series that we've been going through. I feel like some of the things the lessons we've done have been kind of bite-sized, and I guess it's probably a good thing, but I feel like they could have been done in like 1 or 2 weeks, but it just seems important to kind of maybe slow down a little bit and nail it down to some specific things. So we've been talking about worry and being not afraid, but worry and anxiety and stewarding our thoughts, and how I think we've even talked about worry and anxiety before. Pastors preached a whole lesson series on calming our minds and quieting our minds. And for me, in any ways, to think about worry and anxiety and how that's actually my responsibility as a Christian to steward how I think and steward my emotions and how those are connected. For me, it kind of changed the way I view worry and the way I view anxiety and the uncertainties that we all face. But and we all know that. We all know that God brings peace, and this is anything new that we've never heard of or a concept we haven't heard of. But to think of it in a way that God expects us to steward our thoughts. And when we dwell on or worry about things specifically, we really kind of waste what God expects us to do. And we can waste our emotions. We can waste our time. We can squander things based on our focus on our worry and stress and things of that nature. So the last couple times, just to kind of remind you, we talked about the way we think, right? Our stewarding our thoughts and how we think, and thinking with praise. And regardless of the situation that we're in, to choose joy, to steward that, to say, regardless of the good or bad situations that are happening with health or relationships, whatever the case may be, stewarding our thoughts would be to choose joy and to rest in Him, in the Lord, because He is aware of everything that goes on in our life. Nothing happens to us, so He's like, oh, whoops, how did that happen? Or, oh no, what are we going to do? He always knows. And if we understand that He always knows, we can always be joyful. We can always be happy. We can always have the joy of the Lord, regardless of how dire our situations may be. Then we also talked about thinking with poise, or choosing to remain poised, to have and I wrote down the definition, the elegant bearing, or patience, and gentleness. Those two words started to come together at the same time. Patience and gentleness. When things are stressful, when we get worried and anxious, at least for me, when things are stressful or tight, I tend to snap. Right? I'll yell at my kids. I'll lose my temper quickly. I'll get angry at things. If I'm doing something, making something, and it doesn't go right, usually ends up smashed. Right? Like if I'm thinking at work, if things aren't going well and I'm making an ice cream cone and something happens wrong, I have smashed an ice cream cone on the counter before, because they're easy to smash. You're not going to hurt anything, and it's a good way to relieve stress, right, and frustration. But it's definitely not poised, right? It is the opposite of being poised, and God tells us to let our moderation be known, right? To live in a way that stuff like that doesn't happen to us, and it's hard. It's not easy. It's not something natural for us, right? It's real easy to lose your temper and smash an ice cream cone or whatever the case may be in your situation. But that is literally the opposite of let your moderation be known to all men. Those that are around, when that happens, I remember as a kid when my dad would lose his temper, everyone's like, all right, big step backwards, give dad some space. Everyone, shh, don't talk loud, keep it down. Any little thing's going to set him off even more. And I don't want to be like that. And that's what let your moderation be known unto all men. Your moderation is known to be not there to all men when you act that way. So while we do that, and while we lose our temper, or whatever the case may be, stress, worry, things that cause us to live without poise, and it is funny because it happens to all of us, but it's not okay, right? We shouldn't be doing that. I shouldn't be doing that, and that's something we need to work on. So thinking with praise, thinking with poise, again, being responsible and stewarding our thoughts, which stewards our emotions, which stewards our actions. Continuing today, stewarding our thoughts, thinking with prayer. So Philippians chapter 4, verse number 6 is where we'll continue here. And again, these verses very familiar. Philippians 4, verse number 6 says, "Be careful for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. And we use this verse often with with prayer life and asking and praying and asking and supplication and thankfulness, requesting in our prayer life. And it definitely applies to that, and that's what we're going to talk about today. But if you look at the very first part of the verse, be careful for nothing. And if we're to be careful for nothing, that's not like don't be tiptoeing around or being cautious. That's not worrying about stuff, not having cares. If God understands that worry is going to come into our life. Right? We live in a sin-cursed world. We are humans. And the poise that God desires for us to live with, right, and to possess, doesn't come from taking our worry and our stress and our anxiety and stuffing it deep, deep down, right, and pretending like it doesn't exist and just suppressing and smashing it into the smallest, tiniest box we can inside of our hearts and just say, okay, I'm going to live with poise because I'm going to force it and make it happen. You can't take worry and stress and anxiety and do that. And God doesn't expect us to do that. Nor does he expect us to just grin and bear it either. He doesn't expect us to just clench our jaw, tight-lipped, and just muscle through. That's not what God expects. He doesn't say live with moderation in this way. He gives us, in verse number 6, a way that we can do it. He doesn't ask us to ignore our worry. He doesn't ask us to pretend it doesn't exist or ignore the feelings. He just acts simply just says, bring it to me. And that's what verse 6 is saying. He's not saying don't live with care, don't live with worry. He's saying you don't have to live with that because you can bring it to me. You don't have to handle it. You don't have to suppress it. You don't have to deal with it. You don't have to manufacture a solution. You can just bring it to me with prayer, with supplications, with thanksgiving, and just make your requests known. That is what God, he's given us a very simple way to overcome the worry and anxiety that is going to be in your life and the stress that will come to your life. God's not saying, here's a solution to get rid of it and never deal with it. God's saying, here's a solution. When it comes, bring it to me. And that's how you can live with joy, because you're going to bring it to me. That's how you can live with poise or moderation and live in a way that's, honoring to God for those around you, is to bring it to him. So through prayer, supplications, and requests. So prayer is just addressing God. We know what prayer is, right? Prayer is addressing God. Supplication is a persistence and an urgentness in prayer. Urgency. Man, I'm just getting bad on the nesses and the different forms of words. Persistence and urgency in prayer. So when you pray with supplication, you're persistent about it. It matters and you're urgent, right? It's not like, hey, if you can, if you don't mind. It's like, no, God, I need your intervention. I need you to help me with this issue. And request is the actual petition that we offer, right? And God gives us a very simple step-by-step way that we can take our worry, our stress, and our anxiety and bring it to him, and he'll help us with that. So request without worry. And that's kind of the thought here in verse number 6. Be careful for nothing. It's a command, right? It's not God's saying, don't worry. Don't worry. We waste our thoughts. We waste our emotions. We waste our energy when we dwell and focus and obsess and just put all our mind's attention and energy onto the thing we're worried about. He's commanding even the smallest amount of worry to be forbidden, right? Be careful for nothing. And that's, how do you do that? Like that's hard. How do you do that? How do you be careful for nothing? But God is saying the reason we don't have to be careful for nothing is because we have him. We have him to bring all our worries and cares to. But instead, though, in reality, if we want to be real with ourselves and honest with ourselves, how many of us live without worry? How many of us live without anxiety or stress? Zero. We all do. We all live with it, and even as Christians who maybe even know better, really, we all do try to fix it ourselves. We all do try to handle it all on our own. It's the natural tendency, it's the sinful nature of our humanity is to lean on ourselves to fix our things and to fix our worry. The problem with that natural leaning is it's detrimental to faith. It's detrimental to your faith because it takes away what God can do. And he says, bring to me. It takes it out of his hands, and I've got to hold it. and I take it away from him and I hang on to it because I feel more comfortable hanging on to it than letting him and letting go. Anxiety takes our thoughts captive. If you've ever worried about a dentist appointment or a doctor appointment or something coming up that you were worried something bad would happen, that's all you can think about the night before. All right, you lay down to go to bed, and you maybe even before that, your stomach's in knots. You can't eat, you don't want to eat, you can't sleep because you're anxious about what's going to happen tomorrow. And that's a simple, doctor's appointment or something you just don't enjoy doing or don't want to look forward to doing. But now let's take it into financial problems. How do I pay my mortgage? Or let's take it to, relationship problems. How am I going to overcome this relationship hurdle with this friend or this family member or my spouse? We're at odds and we've just kind of pushed it under the rug, but it's still there. How do I overcome that? And that's all you can think about. That's all you can focus on. That's all your mind goes to. And any spare moment where you're not preoccupied with something else you have to do, it's there immediately. And the reason we can talk about it this way and we all understand it this way is because we all do it. And we've all been there to different extents. So anxiety, if you really think about it, anxiety and worry and hanging on to those things it's a form of pride. Because it says, I need to handle this. I've got to hold on to this. I can't just let God have it. I've got to take care of it. Now, we'd never say, well, I'm prideful, like we would think prideful is I'm the best at everything and no one's better than me type pride, right? Well, that's I'm terrible. I'm the worst, right? I worry, I'm anxious, and it's so bad, and it's not godly, and all these things that I'm doing, it's so terrible, but I still hold on to it. That's not pride, but it is. Because it's saying that I am going to handle these things, that I've got to hold on. Even if I don't know how to handle them, I'm going to hold it, though. I'm going to suppress it. I'm going to keep it in this box, but I'm going to keep it here. I don't know what to do with it. I don't know how to fix it, but I'm going to hang on to it, and I've got to hang on to it. No one else can. And if I don't hang on to it tight enough, though, then my spouse is going to start to get worried about the same thing. They're going to be worried that I'm worried. They're going to be stressed out that I'm stressed out. Well, so I've got to keep it even closer. So that way my spouse doesn't really fully understand the amount of anxiety I have over this. And I'll probably even downplay it and pretend like everything's fine. Again, pushing it down to that box even more. Because if my spouse finds out about it, then they're going to worry about me. And then they're worried about me, I'll worry about that. And I'll stress out about them worrying about me. And we don't articulate it like that in our heads, but that's what we do. And it's prideful. It's saying that we're in charge, we're in control, even if we're crazily out of control, but I've got to hang on to it. You're not responsible for it. It's the idea that I'm responsible for how this turns out. Whatever this worry, stress thing that I'm worrying about, the circumstances around it, I am responsible for them. Either I caused them to be, and that's why I am here, or I'm responsible for holding them and keeping them. And it's my responsibility. And oftentimes, a lot of those circumstances are beyond our control. Or at least they've escalated to a point where they're beyond our control. And that's what's brought the worry. Maybe way at the beginning, you could have done something different to fix it. But you can't go back months or years to change something to affect the way it is today, right? We don't have a DeLorean to travel back to 1985 and change anything with. We just don't. It's not real, right? But if we could, that would just be like, I'm in control. I will handle it. I will fix it. And when it gets to a point where it's beyond our control and you can't do anything about it, well, now you're saying, well, I'm responsible for the situation. I'm responsible for the circumstances, and so I'm just going to work with it, regardless if I have control over it or not. We need to believe that God wants to handle it for us. And I think if I asked you, can God handle your worry? You would say yes. Because you believe that, and we believe that. But then when we go home and we look at our checkbook or we look at our health records or we look at the relationships, we say we believe it, but we don't live in a way that we actually do believe it. Because we say it with our mouth, but it doesn't change how we feel about it. What our faith, stepping out in faith with him and our trust that he can handle it. We want to believe that he can do it, but we feel like we're still responsible for handling that. And often, if that's the case, most likely, at least I found in my life, I've probably neglected to pray about it very much at all. right? Whatever the stress is. And maybe it's God help me with this relationship. I really need help. But that's not very urgent. That's not very pleading, right? That's a in passing, God help me if you're going to help me, great, but you probably won't. So I'm going to pray it because I feel obligated as a Christian to pray it. And I'm just kind of going through the motions, really. And now I'm going to try to fix it on my own, or I'm just going to handle it because that's my life now. It's worry. And that's how I live. When we actually pray, when we actually make requests to him, and there's a lot that goes into prayer, and we're not going to go through the praise and the all, everything that prayer is. We could do that, and we have before. But in this case specifically for our worry, our anxiety, when we beg God to intervene, and the more you pray, the more that faith grows, right? You'll have the faith. It's not something that, I'm just not going to pray about it and I believe it, but I'll do it on my own. You need to pray. That means you need to get on your knees at your house, not just on Wednesday night when pastor says, all right, we're going to take 5 minutes. But when you're at home and it's just you, and you need God's intervention, you believe that he listens because he does say, make your requests known. He does tell us how to come to him. And he says, you don't have to worry, come to me. When we do those things, that builds our faith, right? That builds our trust in him. But if we sit here and say, I don't know if I can trust him, and the last time you prayed about it, you can't even remember, well, no wonder. It'd be like me saying, I need to lose weight. Well, when's the last time you worked out? Or when's the last time you walked a mile? I don't know. It's been a while. But I'm really I feel like I can do this without actually doing anything about it. It's illogical. It makes no sense. You'd be like, that's retarded. That's dumb. Don't be smart about it, right? That's not how things work. So when you struggle with anxiety, when you struggle with worry, realize humans deal with that. It's a normal thing. Having fear, having worry, having anxiety in your life in itself is not sinful, right? Having those things, experiencing worry, experiencing anxiety and fear is not sinful. If you look at David in Psalm 56, David, a man after God's own heart, what did he say? He said, what time I am afraid. So he admits he's afraid, he's worried, he's stressed, he's got anxiety, probably more anxiety than we've ever really experienced in our lives. But what the second part of that verse says, what time I am afraid, I will trust in thee. And he prayed to God. He talked to God. He wrote so many Psalms on his petitioning God and requesting God for things in his life. So he had fear, he had anxiety and worry, but he also knew that God would take care of them for him. He also knew God would help them with those things. And so he brought them to him. He stewarded his thoughts. He took his thoughts and his emotions that he had, his fear, and he stewarded them. He spent them wisely by taking them to the Lord. He didn't do like I do sometimes and squander that by worrying about it, by trying to solve it, by trying to fix it, by robbing Peter to pay Paul in this area, by saying, well, if I say this to this person, then they'll say that, and I can fix that with this person, and trying to work out solutions, and then worry, and then probably not do anything actually about it because it's too fear-inducing to actually get involved more. But when we take all those things and give them to him, the sin isn't having the fear or the anxiety. The sin is when we don't purposefully trust God through those times. And, it's difficult. It's not an easy thing to do, is to take your fear and your strength, your worry and your anxiety and give it to the Lord. It almost seems, at times it can seem like just a thing you go through, emotion you go through, to trust and give it to the Lord. But it has to happen in your heart. It has to happen in your mind. You have to steward how you are feeling, which means you have to be in stewardship of your emotions. You can't just let them go. You have to steward your thought process. You have to steward the logic that God has given us and the promises that he's given us that give us the logic, that give us the faith, that give us the trust that he will take care of those things. So the cure for worry really is to let your requests be made known unto God. To be careful of nothing. Verse 6, be careful for nothing, but in everything. That's your life. Right? So you're not supposed to worry about anything. But when you do, But in everything, so every area of your life, no matter where the worry is, no matter how big or how small it is in your life right now, and we all have it, and it's all at the front of your mind right now, the issue, the situation, or situations that are causing you stress and causing you worry, you are thinking of and you know. And the Lord says in everything, by prayer, so it's talking to him, supplication, pleading with him, with thanksgiving, right? And we'll talk about that here. Let your requests be made known. So when you have those fears and everything in your life and anxiety and everything that you're worried about that causes you to lose sleep, that you stress over, all those things, God says, bring them to me. Talk to me about them. Ask me about them. Make your requests known to me. So the cure for worry is to let your requests be made known to God. When you have worry, when worry is overwhelming in your life and in your thought process, that worry, that anxiety, that stress, it corrodes your faith. When you worry, when you focus and dwell and you're overwhelmed, worry corrodes your faith. It breaks it away. It's like the shore of sand that the waves keep hitting against. Eventually it falls, little falls, little falls. It erodes that shoreline of faith when you worry. You allow those waves to crash against your faith over and over, and you don't put your faith in him, but you focus on the worry, it erodes that. When worry corrodes faith, when to strengthen your faith, instead of worry, thankfulness strengthens your faith. When you think about your life and you think about all the worries that are in your life, but then when you talk to God, you ask God about the things that you need help with and bring your request to him, and then you're grateful for the things that he already has done in your life, your faith will be strengthened. If you focus on the worry and don't steward your thoughts and let it go, worry will corrode it. But when you're grateful for the things you do have, grateful for the relationships in your life that are in good shape, grateful for the health to be here today, thankful for the things that you do have, the clothes on your back, the house, the warmth. I mean, I don't have to go through the list to remind you of all the things to be grateful for. You're adults. But when you are focused, steward your thoughts to the thankfulness, teamed with the prayer for the things you can't control, your trust in him grows. Your faith in him is strengthened. So you have the ability to control how strong your faith is based on obedience to him, right? You can't just muster it up, but if you pray, if you focus on the things and gratefulness that you do have, your strength will increase. And God always comes through, right? God never doesn't help us. It may not always be the answers you would expect or want, but when you can live your life and look back, you will see that every answer God has given you is exactly what you needed to have and exactly what you needed to go through. And sometimes God puts us through, doesn't put us through worry, but allows worry to come to our lives so that we do rely on him. And sometimes it takes us a while to get that. Sometimes I can be thick-headed, thick-hearted, hard-hearted, and sometimes it means I worry. God's like, when are you going to just let me handle it? When are you going to stop trying to do this mountain of worry on your own? And as a human, I'm like, oh, I got it. I got to handle it. And all I have to do is go to God with prayer, supplication, make my requests known with thanksgiving. And God says, finally, let me handle it with you. Let me help you through it. And we can live a life where it's not perfect and not be stressed out about worry and anxiety, and live a life that is being stewarded, our thoughts and our emotions, so that we can serve. That's the goal. God wants he wants to handle everything for us so that we can turn around and do more things for him, live for him, help each other, help those that maybe aren't as strong in the faith, and help them, show them where we've been and how they can come through it too, and how they can look to God. And that's what God wants us to do. He wants us to do things that glorify him. So if you can take the things that are bothering you in your life, the things that bring anxiety and worry, and you can say, you're not saying, well, I'll just turn a blind eye and God will handle everything, whatever. I won't write another check for my mortgage. God will handle it. No, we have to be smart about it, right? We have to be wise and use the logic again that God gives us. But when we can take those worries and not let it affect our day-to-day life, you can still be a good wife. Even though there's some stress and anxiety in your life, because you know God's handled it, you can still be a good husband. You can still be a good dad that doesn't lose his temper with his kids because you're having a stressful day. When you can take those things and understand that God will handle them, and you can still be the right kind of husband, the right kind of wife, the right kind of dad and mom and Christian, that brings God glory. And that's God's ultimate purpose for his people, is to bring him glory. Is everything that we do, no matter what, eating, drinking, whatever we do in our life, the goal is to bring him glory with everything that we do. And if we're focused and stressed and anxiety, it's going to be real hard to bring him glory through those things because we're so focused on us and our problems. But when we bring it to him with prayer, thanksgiving, then we can focus on the things that he's given us to focus on. We can focus on him. We can focus on doing things to bring him glory. We can have the right relationship with our spouse that shows the younger married couples and the teenagers and everyone that's looking at you for your marriage relationship. And it can give glory to God because he has allowed you to have the relationship you have. Right? Your kids, those of us that have kids, your kids know where your marriage relationship is at. They know when mom and dad are fighting. And sometimes we're not real good about not fighting in front of them, are we? We try, sure. We try to have the big ones in a separate room, right? But we snip at each other, right? We disrespect. We treat each other unloving in front of our children. We are giving them an example of how a marriage works. And we all want to give the right example. We all want to show them how marriage should be, because the only place they're going to see it is you. They're not going to go to some book at Barnes & Noble and find out how a marriage should be. Right? They're not going to watch documentaries or watch the news or watch the classroom. They aren't going to learn that there. They're going to learn it with you. So moms, dads, when anxiety causes you to be short with each other, when anxiety causes you to downright be mean, your kids see that. And that's how marriage is. Now, God can overcome anything, right? God can overcome bad marriages and have kids that grow up with great marriages. God can do anything. But we should be doing our best to bring God glory. And so when we focus on him, I mean, I just took it, it's not even in my notes. But when we allow God to handle it, we can have better marriages. I mean, we haven't talked about marriage specifically for a while, and it's been on my mind a little bit lately, that the way we operate in our relationship, especially these days, I think that's probably why, but in these days, the way we operate as husband and wife in front of our children, in front of the teens at this church, I mean, the youth group they look at your marriage, they look at your life as young adults, right, that have married and have a strong house, and they look at that as their future. I mean, I remember looking at married couples as a teenager, and as a boy, it's a different thought process, but you look at the stability, you look at the strength of the husband, and you're like, that's what I want with my family someday. You may not have those exact thoughts, but that's what's being portrayed, and that's what's being learned. And we don't know it. We don't comprehend it. We don't see it because we're just too busy making sure our kids don't trip some old lady in the foyer, right? We're making sure that they're not running. We're making sure that they're paying attention, and we're parenting. But those teenagers and those singles and younger couples are looking to see what it's supposed to be like, and what example are we giving them? That's stewardship. That's stewardship. So we can't say, well, we have our problems, but that's our problems. No one has to deal with them. No. Your problems are your problems, and you do have to deal with them. But everybody is affected by them. Not just you, not just your kids. Everyone in this room. We look at each other's marriages, and you know what? It's our responsibility to steward our relationships for each other, to encourage each other, and to, again, glorify God. So don't say, well, my problems are my problems, no one has to deal with them. No, God can handle all your problems if we let him and if we ask him to. And so when we do that, it brings him glory. And that's the ultimate purpose. I'm getting off on a rabbit trail, so I'm going to stop now. We're right about the end anyway. So I'm going to pray.